Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast, the place where we shine a light on truth. I'm Jason Paul. Now, in this episode, we're talking to a beautiful human being called Tracy Jackson. She's a medium. She also is a hypnotherapist. She specializes in NLP, Reiki, EFT, meridian tapping, and mindset coaching. Now, Tracy has always felt called to share the story that she's come on today to tell. And it's only recently that she's felt actually able to tell this story, because this story relates to her mum and it stems from her childhood, and there was always a quiet inner knowing that her experiences that she sort of faced in her childhood would one day help others. Now, the passing of her mum in October just gone was a catalyst that made this feel, quite frankly, like the right time for Tracy. Now, while her mum was alive, Tracy felt she may not have been comfortable with this story kind of being told publicly. But now Tracy feels she is speaking not just for herself, but as a voice for her mum and all to help other people. Now, Tracy has got such a big heart, and I've had the privilege of spending some days with her on courses, and whenever she walks into a room, she always lights it up. So Tracy's mum did live through domestic abuse and a generational cycle of fear and control. Now, many people experience that. They find that their parents, have one behavioural trait, and then that kind of gets passed down through the generations. So Tracy recognises now, kind of with clarity and compassion, how strong her mum truly was, even if that strength wasn't visible at the time. Now, one thing I really took from this conversation was just how much Tracy's life is sort of built around helping people, and it really seems like so many of those kind of former experiences in her childhood have kind of bled through all of her work today, which is just so interesting. It reminded me a lot of, me following in my granddad's footsteps as a medium. So you're going to enjoy this episode. So this is my conversation with Tracy Jackson, titled "The Day My Mum Changed the Way I See Life." Oh, I'm excited for you to come on, Tracy Jackson. Welcome to the Soul Sync.
Thank you, Jason.
Well, I just want to say from the get-go, first of all, it's really lovely to have you on here. And I know you're a little bit nervous coming on the podcast, so don't be. I'm sat here with a coffee. You're sat here with a lovely tea. Welcome. So you wanted to come on. First of all, just to explain a bit of who you are, you're a medium. You do transformational life coaching, and I've come across you through the mediumship work that you do. So that's a bit about your background, but we're going to find out all about that anyway. So you wanted to come on to talk about your story, and I know it's particularly important to you, so thank you first of all for coming on and doing that. I guess first of all, I wanted to know, what moment did you kind of realise that your story wasn't just a personal story and you wanted to come on and share with the lovely Soul Sync listeners about your story?
Jason, I've felt that all throughout my life I've wanted to share my story. I've felt that even as a little girl, I used to think the experiences that I had, one day I would turn them into a positive for others. So I think it's something I've always felt within my heart, that I was one day going to share my story. But I suppose my mum's passing back in October has ignited that. And because I'm not quite sure how comfortable she would have felt when she was here. But now I just want to I just want people to know that her life mattered. She was the strongest person I've ever come across, but I didn't always realise that. And I suppose since her passing, I've realised that more than ever so. So I just feel it's the right time now.
Well, I know that we had a very similar back of the year, because you lost your mum, I lost my dad, and it's already, I know for me, changed the way that I view my mediumship in a lot of ways. My dad was, we've got a lot of similarities, actually. I say that. We may have even more. Who knows, Tracy? But my father, he passed away, and he was very much not a believer in anything such as this. Well, not that I know of, but he lived his life very much through a lens of fear. So I myself never really talked to him about, you know, my story. Why was it that because you obviously described about kind of the relationship there, and your mum not necessarily perhaps, you know, would wanted you to come on and share this story. So what were your what was your perspective, and why is that in terms of your mum?
Because she lived a very difficult life. She faced a life of domestic abuse, a generational cycle of abuse, and she never got free from it. So I think that fear of, she never found her own voice. And I suppose I'm here today to be that voice for her.
So to take us back in time then, because all of this is relevant to your story, the work that you do, and I really want to understand today. And it takes, first of all, it takes courage to come onto anything to share a story of vulnerability. So firstly, I commend you for that. And this is a show of speaking one's truth. So we're going to go back in time, because it's through talking about these experiences. And I said this to a guest the other day, someone came on, you know, talking a lot about the technical aspects of mediumship, but a lot of the time it's not always, a lot of the time, every time it's about people's story and what got them to that position and what can be learnt, because ultimately mediumship is there to help us in our life's journey. So Tracy, take us back in time, please.
Back in time,
Yes.
from a very young age, I witnessed, you know, domestic violence on all levels. And I suppose looking back as a little girl, I couldn't quite understand why my mum never freed herself away from this chaos. And I think what I found even more difficult to understand was that I almost felt she was making that choice of sticking with this cycle, these patterns that she was in. But for her own children, I couldn't understand why she couldn't remove herself, because, you know, at the end of the day, she was the lady that brought us into the world, and she was the one that was supposed to protect us and keep us safe. And it couldn't have been further than the truth. And so I spent many years feeling incredibly angry with my mum. But now, you know, as a spiritualist, we believe that we choose our paths. And now I look at her and I think, gosh, you know, how incredibly brave to choose that path. Because I look at my mum's life now and I think how much I've learnt. I feel that me and my mum, yeah, I've got other siblings, but I'm just going to speak on behalf of myself and my mum. But I feel that, you know, we've walked the hardest path. And now for me just to be a voice to hopefully bring some hope and light to others that may be walking the same paths, it really does mean a lot to me.
What's interesting, because obviously, Tracy, I know you to some degree. I'd love to say that I've spent weeks and weeks in your company because you're a lovely person and someone I really like to be around. But what strikes me already is so much of what you do now is focused around helping people with the very issues, by the sounds of it, that your own mum dealt with. So it's kind of what was her path has so massively shaped yours. And it seems like your whole life in some way has been helping people that's come off. And it's interesting, Tracy, because it's, you know, it's very much the path I seem to be walking. Of my granddad's path is very much off the back of that, which is interesting. That isn't just there's more to my observation. I'm obviously striking on something there because I've got your website in front of me and I'm thinking it seems very similar to, you know, tell me more about that.
And I suppose, yeah, because back in 2015, as I had I was aware of my very first spiritual experience, but also I was taking a path of, I suppose, understanding who I was and what I had to offer. And, you know, I'm sure many of the viewers have heard me tell this story before, but I came across a book that's called The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And I became absolutely obsessed with finding out about the power of the subconscious mind, how it has such a hold on us. But again, I had this experience, this spiritual experience that completely blew my mind. And I had to find more about how that even occurred. So I almost felt like I was taking these two paths and I felt so drawn. And I think over the past 11 years, I've been so incredibly confused because I'm like, well, do I take this path of helping people to heal, or am I taking my spiritual path? It's only just very recently that I've realized that these two paths aren't separate. They're one, you know.
That's really interesting as well, because you are coming at this from, and I can understand how this must have evolved as well, because you do a lot of different therapies, and I don't know where the mediumship came in alongside the hypnotherapy in your background, but I'm guessing the hypnotherapy and the other treatments came first. So how did this all shape? Oh no, you're shaking your head saying no, that's not the case. Tell us more about that. But I also want to know how, now you believe it's all one and the same, so how do you apply that to help people stuck in perhaps what is a generational pattern? That seems like what you're describing.
So I suppose if we go back to 2015, you know, I'll tell you very briefly how I got into. It's weird because as one door opens, another door opens, and another door opens. I'm sure you understand that. And so, yeah, I came across the book, and it quotes that by changing the way that you think, you ultimately change the way you feel. When you change the way you feel, your whole life changes. And I remember feeling very skeptical about this. But my nana had just passed away, and my whole world collapsed when my nana passed away. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I'm going to start to implement this. So that's when I began to journal. And so very soon after that, I was Googling, as we all do, and I came across Richard Bandler, who's the creator of NLP. And before I knew it, I was signed up for a week-long course in London to become a practitioner in NLP. So that's when I was introduced to hypnosis and various other things. That week, I can't even tell you how many fears that I faced, because the life that I'd had growing up really caused me to have difficulties recognizing my own worth, having love for oneself. You know, my confidence wasn't great. So I was taking these two paths and I'm thinking, gosh, who is this person? I didn't recognize myself, to tell you the truth, Jason. But I felt this calling within my heart, and it was just pulling me along. And how many times I've said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. And then we're brought back onto the path, aren't we? Do you know? And I'm sure you can resonate.
Yeah, what you're describing as well is, and I can relate to this because, as we all do, we go through our lives and whatever traumas we do face in those earlier years. And, you know, quite frankly, a lot of us don't have, childhoods that we would want to put on a pin board and, look at all the time. But what it does is it gives you these beliefs about yourself. And, a lot of the beliefs that we have in life, we're living a lens through our own reality. And these beliefs that we have, and I'm sure you must find this in your work all the time, can be very, very, very hard to overcome, especially when they're limiting beliefs, and you really have to look in a mirror to really get to, well, you can have one belief, can't you? But actually when you go, and I've noticed this through journaling myself, using always the word what for. I want to do this behavior. Why do I want to do this behavior? What do I think it brings me? And go, what for, what for, what for? And I get all the way back to the sometimes the limiting belief, and I think, where have you come from? Why is this belief come from now? I've got. So how do you must have had a lot of those yourself, and that's a lot of, I guess, what you come up across now. So how do people overcome those, and how did you do that?
So in the beginning, I really wanted to understand. I wanted to find a way for people to heal without medication, without self-medication, with medicating with alcohol and drugs and things. I wanted to find a more natural way to help people to heal. And, honestly, I became absolutely obsessed. I was reading books, Googling, doing all sorts of courses. And it became so simple to me that we are actually programmed. We're programmed from such an early age, in fact, from the time we're in our mother's womb. So up until the age of around 6 or 7. So that's why we see repeated cycles throughout generations. So I began to understand a little bit more as to why my mum was so stuck. And it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because I thought, it isn't actually, yes, she's got to take some, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say blame, but I almost felt like it isn't solely her fault, the path that she'd taken, because there had been generational cycles of domestic abuse. So, and I just felt that she never had the strength, the knowledge, or was she meant to walk that path, Jason, so that we can learn from her?
Well, it's interesting because so many people, there's a generational cycle, isn't there, with so many people where it just repeats itself and repeats itself. But you yourself have interrupted that generational pattern, and I guess how do people come to interrupt that? Because I guess you've interrupted it so much that you've gone the other way, and it feels to me that a lot of your life has now gone to fighting for that very cause to help people.
Absolutely. And as I said briefly before, all about changing the way that we think. Our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's true or false, or good or bad. It just simply likes what's familiar. So, that's why we see these generational cycles being continued, because it just wants to keep what's familiar. And the fantastic thing about this is when we do break a cycle, it's not just for us, it's a ripple effect. Think of the generation, the generations that are yet to come, and we're breaking them cycles for those also.
It's really interesting. You're just making me think of so many different points there. And what you're doing today is you're coming on, very much to honour the path that your mum has walked without repeating their pain, but, coming on to help other people to sort of use her experiences and give her a voice. And I think that's really interesting. Sort of going back to the subconscious mind, because you're touching on something there that's interesting. And a lot of people listening to this podcast are going to be at very different stages of their journey. And, I understand the concept of the subconscious mind, but explain to us, because even I'm still, Tracy, sometimes processing this. Well, what's conscious and what's subconscious? What does that look like for people? And how do people start to recognise if what, their subconscious is doing is not helping them or limiting them in their life?
So it's, your subconscious mind, I heard a really great analogy the other day by Louise Hay, and it really made sense to me. And, she asked us to imagine the subconscious mind just here in the pit of our stomach. And the subconscious mind, it takes note of every memory, every experience, every feeling, everything that we speak. And imagine the subconscious mind, it creates filing cabinets, and every thought, experience, every memory, it files these into certain filing cabinets, let's say, yeah? And then if we go back to reprogramming, because that's what we want to do, we want to rewrite the story, we want to break these cycles. When we begin to start to think differently, the subconscious mind, it almost goes into panic and thinks, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do. We don't know which filing cabinet to put these thoughts. So maybe we go back to a filing cabinet of self-doubt, and then it takes us back into the norm. And then, but if we repeatedly and be consistent over and over again of rewriting different thoughts, like statements, affirmations, I am worthy, I am enough, I am loved, it starts to create new filing cabinets. And so, we begin to rewrite our story.
So I know what you mean by the subconscious mind, and I've had to rewire mine earlier on in the year. I didn't realise I didn't realise that I was looking at a lot of things through a lens of fear rather than through a lens of love. And the most scariest thing about that was I didn't even realise myself that I was even in that default way of thinking. And it was the lovely Eileen Davis with a lovely positivity band I've spoken about on this podcast that started to make me aware of the fact that I was not thinking through a lens of love all the time. But actually that was important because, yes, I was going through a difficult time, but what I was trying to do, the answer to a lot of my problems then was to do with work and whatever, but I didn't realise that I wasn't in a manifesting mindset at all because of, like you said, about the fact of how you feel. You're not going to bloody manifest anything if you're in a state of fear and whatever, and I know that, but we get into these difficult periods of our life, and sometimes we need someone to throw us a bloody life ring in and pull us out, give us a shake, get us back on a good energetic level and sort of carry on. So I wanted to ask, because one of the things you very helpfully put to me in the notes before we spoke was you described there that since you were a little girl, you knew even at that point when you were kind of going through this experience, that you knew then that your mum's story would be something that could be used in a positive way to help others even then. Tell me about that. That sounds
I just
fascinating.
remember as a little girl thinking, even mid chaos, I used to think to myself, I'm living this for a reason. I used to think to myself, one day I will turn this bad situation into something good for other people. And, I was super young when I used to have these feelings, and, here I am. Hopefully.
It's crazy that even at that young age and you could go through kind of something like that. I want to ask, because you mentioned another thing you put in your notes, which was very interesting, was about 2015 being a sort of turning point for you. Tell me about that, because you kept me very intrigued, Tracy, because all I've got is 2015.
Well, 2015 was the turning point. Yeah, it was the turning point. The experience that I had was my first spiritual experience. When I look back, it's always been there, Jason, but I just thought it was the norm for everybody who had these experiences and feelings. But in May 2015, I had a visitation from my nan and granddad. My granddad had been passed away for over 20 years, and my nana wasn't yet passed. She was still here. She was well. She was fine. And I remember them coming to me in the night, and I can see him as clear as, it was yesterday. And my granddad said to me, Tracy, I'm just coming to let you know that I'm taking Nana home now. He says, and I just want you to know that she's safe. She's with me. And I remember them both embracing me in a hug. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in absolute floods of tears because I remembered it, I remembered everything about it. And my husband said to me, what on earth is the matter? And I just said to him, my granddad's been for my nana. She's going to pass. She's going to die. And then she died 2 days later, my nana. She just literally fell asleep. She had a passing of an angel. And so obviously, you know, how did that even occur, Jason? How did that even happen?
It's interesting because when you something like that, because I didn't know what your worldview was prior to that. Did you believe in the spirit world prior to this happening?
Yeah. I feel that they've been knocking on my door always, you know. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, yes, because I feel that they've been banging on my door, and I feel that, because recently I've been questioning myself about how much I feel that they've actually helped and influenced my journey along the way, because I've started to feel that I've looked back at things and I've started to think, there's lots of coincidences around this particular part of my life or this particular part of my journey. And, you know, I do think there's probably an element of some of even my spirit helpers and friends probably getting very frustrated over the years or probably how much they've been trying to help. But, you know, I haven't been listening to their signs, so to speak. So that happened to you. And then it sounds like that was very, a very, very pivotal life moment. So that happened. Your granddad came, told you about this, earth-shattering moment that was about to appear for you. Then what did you do with that?
I suppose. I mean, it's a long time that I remember, but I almost taught myself out of it. Do you know what I mean? Initially, I thought, Nana's fine, she's well, but then when she passed away, it was like, gosh. So that's where my spiritual journey really began, because I needed to understand. And then after that, lots of different things began to happen. I used to go to bed at night time and I wasn't asleep, but not awake. And I could see faces, lots of faces. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And if you take yourself back to your beginning, Jason, it's incredibly confusing, isn't it? It's so confusing.
It is, because even what you're saying there about not wanting to believe it, even though I'd been around kind of these people, well, I've been around a lot of people in my mum's side who were very, not shoving the belief of the spirit world in my face, but, there was always talk of it going on. So I kind of had no reason to believe it, but I also, I had lots of reason to believe it because everyone else believed it. But even I wouldn't say more than 99% believed it, because of the fact that I thought maybe it was wishful thinking that the spirit world exists. So when I did the first ever time I had an experience, which this is the crazy thing. The first ever time I had an experience wasn't because of someone doing a reading for me. My first real experience, because I had readings, but they were never readings that I would say prove to me that the spirit world existed because of the quality of the mediumship. So the weirdest thing was, my first experience was me bringing a spirit person through to someone else, and that moving them and them crying, and me knowing that that was real and the emotion there. So I couldn't understand how my first experience was me bringing someone through. And then I started to go, no, I just can't believe that. But then I thought, well, no, that woman was crying in front of me. It was, so mine was very much about, then I couldn't, that happened a few times, but then I couldn't recreate it again. So, I can understand that, because then I, indeed myself couldn't leave it alone. So how do you think, so that was for you a really big sort of turning point. How do you feel that, people listening to this, listeners, can recognize when such a life force is changing them, or something is happening, even if it is in one's life a crazy moment? A lot of these moments in time, we don't see it in the right there in the moment. We think, it's awful for what it could be, but off the back of that, a lot of the time, that is the catalyst for change. It's that moment in time, and you must see that in your own work.
I think as well, Jason, as you're touching on that, going back to my early days, I was so confused. I remember sitting my husband down and saying, I'm having, lots of weird experiences.
So, Tracy, you were explaining firstly, you were having these experiences. You were talking to your husband about those. What was he thinking about this? What was did he believe in this at the time? How did he approach this and handle this with you?
No. At the time, no. He didn't understand it, didn't get it, but he's always been incredibly supportive. And the children. So
what did he advise you to do off the back of these experiences? Where did you go with this?
basically follow my heart.
Right. And where did that lead you then? So you started following one's heart.
So it was so strange, Jason, because it's weird when you start walking the path. Teachers appear, don't they? Do you know? It's very bizarre. But the place where I did end up was sitting in circle at Stafford Spiritual Church. So I used to travel to Stafford every week for a couple of years. So yeah, that's the sister of Arthur Finlay College.
So when you were starting to unfold your mediumship, did sort of communication from the spirit world flow sort of very naturally to you so much, was that something that unfolded quite easily?
No, it's been a journey. It really has been a journey, Jason, honestly. And I remember sat in circle probably second or third time over at Stafford, and our tutor Karen, she said to us, just open your mind to receive a message and you can share it with the group. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the only one without a message. I'm going to be the only one without a message to share. And I just sat and within a split second, Be the Light That You Are came to me. And not only was it something really beautiful, but I was just so grateful that I had a message to share with the group.
You're making me smile because it reminds me of a little while ago. So I think I know that the Spiritualist Church that you've gone to is one of the very, great ones of the country. It is a bit of a postcode lottery. Some people have a much better church than other people. My circle, so I have a very nice Spiritualist church near me, and I do wish I turned up to it more often, but sometimes it's hard to get me out the house at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday. Once I've got settled in, that is an excuse. I do think mediumship requires discipline, but I went to this circle, and I've probably attended it about 8 times in the last 2 years, but I love it when I go. So we've never done mediumship, so I just sort of come to the assumption that this circle was just a psychic circle, which I was very happy with, but all we ever did was psychic stuff. So it got to one particular evening, and I've been persuading my mum, look, it'd be very beneficial for you to start, doing some of this psychic stuff. I think it will help you a lot. So she came along to the Spiritualist Church on the first night, and the man said instantly, the very nice person who leads it said, no, you two sit separately, could establish we were trouble from the start. So he split us up. And then the funniest thing was, so my mum, he then said, so what we're going to do tonight is make a mediumship connection. And my mum's face looking at me like daggers across the room, like, you told me this wasn't that. And I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't realise it was mediumship. So then she, in the car on the way home, I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, look, I had a woman that I had to do a reading for. I sat there thinking, oh my God, what can I've come through? So then she said to the lady, well, I've got a dog with me. And the lady said, oh, I've just lost my dog. And my mum said, oh, God, now it's a brown dog. And she made out as if she felt she was just making this up. I said, so what happened? And she said, oh, I even sort of got the name of the dog. I said, that's not you making that. She said, I never want to go again because it was just, I felt like I was a fraud. I said, well, you're obviously getting that from somewhere, if you've got the name, then so be it. So, another thing you put down here was, and, this is the thing with the soul. So we could go in so many different directions, but you put down here about NLP, fear of for a moment, I thought it said shakes. But fear of snakes. Tell me about that. And even now, I'm looking at it, still thinking it says shakes, but it's snakes.
Yeah. Oh, Jason, it's a story I love to tell.
Please do.
This is the first NLP course in London that I went to with Dr. Richard Bandler. Now, I've faced so many fears that week, but one of them we had to do a phobia day. So I knew I would have to face my fear of snakes at some point during that week. I arrived on the Saturday. This was the Thursday. So I was well prepared and got myself up, and I was front row, first thing in the morning, ready to face my fears of snakes. And then I think it was 4 men carried this huge snake onto the stage.
Oh, blimey.
And this fear inside of me, I just thought, crikey, if they drop that snake, it's going to eat me. And I just burst into tears and I ran to the back of the room. And Kathleen, one of the organisers, she came up to me and she says, "Isn't she beautiful?" And I remember thinking, absolutely not. And she says, "You'll be next." I says, "I won't. I've changed my mind." She says, "You will." I says, "I won't." Anyway, later on that day, we were put together, we were paired up. And this lovely Australian man was helping me to change my mindset around snakes. And I remember sitting there, we probably spent half an hour or so together. And there was this big black screen. And we walked around together, and Kathleen was there with this python. And I honestly, I just wanted to run for the hills. I wanted to get myself out.
I bet you did.
Terrified. Anyway, is that causing any distraction? The noise in the background.
It'll be all right in editing. Yes, don't worry about that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we went round, and honestly, I was terrified. And she says to me, Kathleen says, "Tracy, you're obviously not ready to change your life just yet." And something stirred inside me, and I'm like, "Oh, yes, I am."
That's a very good and powerful line, isn't it? I bet that got you back in your seat for the exits.
Oh, this gentleman, he was so kind. So he had me putting my hand down on the top of his, and we just went down to touch the snake. And he had me just touching the snake with the tip of my finger. And then I held it. But the motto of the story is, Jason, is what else have we been telling ourselves all our lives? That we can't do something when in fact, with the right mindset, we can do anything. Everything, what it taught me was everything that we ever want is on the other side of fear. When we break through fear and we have the right mindset, we can be and we can achieve anything we want.
Well, it's fear, isn't it, that holds us back in so many areas of our life. It's, fear of change, fear of, oh God, it's just crazy the amount of times I even think back in my own journey where fear has held me back from taking one action or another. And the crazy thing is sometimes there's been instances in my own life where I've known I've needed to change. I've known even that the change is a positive change to make. And then even then, we can still have the ego drag us back into the thing that we know isn't no longer serving us. And it does, also beg the question on how much of our fear is learned, and it's a pattern of behaviour that's got us there. And the fear that we could have, even with the snake, your ultimate fear, I guess, if you boil down the fear of the snake, it is in some way a fear of death. Without being dramatic about it, I don't know. Maybe it's the fear that the snake is going to bite you or eat you. I don't know what it might be, but it's very, very interesting. And I guess that's also, again, you must find in your own work for a lot of other people. How would you say that you go about addressing a fear and kind of working through such fears that we have?
Jason, it's simple. It's just so simple because, that lack of self-worth, not feeling good enough. The people that I work with, you've got to be ready for change for a start. But I would say the majority of the people that I work with need to learn to love themselves. They need to find their own worth and know that they're good enough. When you work on, on just finding that love within, everything else falls into place.
I do agree with you. Earlier on, you said about, you mentioned that when you did your one of your first contacts, one of the things that came to you was be the light that you are. I guess what does that mean to you? What does that phrase, and firstly, what does the phrase mean to you? But going beyond the phrase, what is that energy that carries?
Oh, Jason, I've just very recently realised, and it is learning to love ourselves. Be the light that you are is, having that love within your heart for oneself. And when you have that, gosh, going back, to when I was younger to think I would be here. Well, so many things that I've done over the past 11 years, I shock myself. But I think especially now, because I'm at a point, and especially with our lovely teacher, Eileen, because the growth that I've had, not necessarily just in my mediumship and my spiritual journey, but the growth within myself that I've had, because she really does teach us in such a beautiful way that just step out as you, as be proud just to be you, and I feel the most content within myself than I ever have in my whole life.
That's lovely to hear. And it's amazing even how much in life, we can dim our own light to, well, for so many reasons. It might be a lack of belief in yourself, but we also dim our light a lot of the time because of other people. I think to myself, how often, do we go in our own lives to things like, oh, I don't want to speak. I don't want to sort of go out there and, reveal these aspects of myself or talk about something I'm passionate about because I'm worried about what other people might think. And there's all these things that come into it, which, even if I think about how many times I look at people in their careers, advising them on recruitment every day, and I see people who are not stepping into what is their full potential by virtue of, fear of the unknown, change, and all these things. And what they're doing is they're sort of just putting a parasol over our light bit by bit by bit. Was there a time you felt that you've dimmed your light in order to survive?
Probably all my life. And I think especially the spiritual aspect of our work, because not everybody understands it. So I think this is really the first time that I've really spoken my truth, and I really, for the first time, I don't particularly care what anybody else thinks, because it's so incredibly important to me, my spiritual journey.
And I think a lot of the time as well, you know, and I say this for the lovely listener, but I think a lot of the time we need to put these, quite rigid boundaries in place in our life to make sure, that we're able to be around the right people, have the right energy in our lives, be around the right, because I always use the term, and I used to actually say this as a line to recruit into my business. I used to say it quite proudly, we have no mood hoovers here, people that are going to drain the energy. But, especially, turning my attention to manifesting this time in the year, lots of people are thinking about what they want to achieve in their year, and a lot of the time that is, shining as brightly as possible. But in order to do that, and I actually even think with anything like manifesting, that it all starts with a system. You can say, yes, I want to bring this thing into my life, this thing into my life, this thing into my life, but if you don't feel like you deserve it, you don't truly believe that you are worthy of it, and you have these blocks in the way, you're never going to step into that full light. So a lot of the time, in order to do that, you have to go through, and I guess this kind of goes back to a lot of the work that you do to help people, but it goes back to helping people identify that and work through that and then hopefully come out the other side shining as brightly as possible, like a great big stadium floodlight, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think I look back in 2015, and I'm not the most patient of people, do you know what I mean? And
No, I'm not. I'm awful.
and it really does become an obsession, both paths, I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn and know as much as I possibly could. And, and if somebody has said to me back in 2015 that it'd take me 11 years to get to the point where I am today, I would have been horrified. But the fact is, I've learned so much about who I am and who I want to be. And I want to be a voice for my mum. I want to be a voice for them young women and children, but also for those that are beginning to have them experiences, them spiritual experiences that you just can't quite put your finger on. And it's confusing. And, if you can be a helping hand to somebody that's just starting out on the journey, then how lovely would that be? Because there wasn't particularly anybody there for me. I had to find it out for myself. I suppose it wasn't really up until you walk through the doors of the college that it all really does start to make sense.
I know. And obviously you mentioned the college, which is the Arthur Findlay College, which, I've been to myself. I think a lot of people who've probably listened to this podcast have. And if you haven't, where have you been? But you sort of went there and you've been unfolding your mediumship. And I know that for you has been, a massive part of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to close this beautiful episode today, then, you've come on here, a big part of this is, in memory to your mum and, what she's kind of went through. What do you hope is the sentiment that you can leave us on today that kind of honours your mum's journey and what she went through and kind of her life experiences?
I think the biggest part of my work is, bringing an awareness of the importance of finding love for ourselves, to know our own worth and to know we're good enough. We're as good as the next person, We're all walking this life together. No one's more important than the other. And I think, that awareness of really find love for oneself and having trust.
I agree. And I think that we have to trust in the way that we feel. I think so much of the time in our lives, we go up there in our head and that's where, you get into these anxiety patterns because you then go into a state of panic. You start getting cortisol releasing, and you get stuck in these loop patterns of worry, fear, stress. And I honestly believe stress is, one of the biggest killers. It manifests itself in so many ways. And, I think you need to trust yourself. If you feel a certain way and it doesn't feel right to you in your life, the decision you're about to make or whatever, doesn't matter how many times people may persuade you. I always think go with what you feel. If you're overthinking something, then why are you overthinking it? Because it doesn't feel right a lot of the time. Well, Tracy Jackson, all that leaves me to say, my darling, is thank you for coming on to the Soul Sync.
Thank you, Jason.
Isn't Tracy just absolutely wonderful? That story and her coming on really did warm and touch my heart there. And I know it took a lot of courage for Tracy to come on and share what is a really personal story to her. And you know what? It reminded me at times I need to just get better sometimes at speaking my truth and just, not worrying so much. So if you do want to keep up to date with the Soul Sync when the latest episodes are out, do subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and then you'll be notified when new episodes come out. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel where I do also put out mediumship videos as and when I can. Lots of love. Until next time, goodbye.